Good morning, Michael. A warm welcome to you on behalf of APAC News Network. Very briefly, APAC News Network is a media organization headquartered out of Noida, and we have offices in Hyderabad and outside India, branches in Singapore, Malaysia, and Dubai. Primarily, our focus till now has been in government, healthcare, and education. Perhaps the only B2B media in last 1 year who hosted even Prime Minister Modi in one of our community programs. But now we are increasingly also focusing on enterprise and IT and BFSI and trying to see synergies between these different verticals. So today, what we would like to know from you is one, obviously an update on the solutions and services from Fortinet. And next is now we talked last year, but now the pandemic situation continuing, how it impacted the business in the last couple of quarters and how you helped some of your enterprises secure better and sort of looking forward what will be the roadmap for the next few quarters. So maybe we can start first with the solutions and services that are currently offered by Fortinet.
So good morning, Rajneesh, and thank you for the opportunity given to explain and discuss about the security challenges, security threats, and as a security partner, how Fortinet can help customers and partners. So just to start with, Fortinet being a network security vendor, we are doing extremely well in the global market as well as in India. So we consider ourselves as one of the market leaders in the space, where financial perspective, from a market leadership perspective in terms of market reach, market cap, etc. We continue to grow at a very healthy pace, and we are consolidating on all that aspects. The same is true when we look at the leaders quadrant for two technologies, which is network security and WAN edge. Similarly, we are also mentioned in various other Gartner quadrants. So we are present in totally 8 magic quadrants, and similarly, the Gartner Peer Insight Review also, we have one of the highest scores what is possible compared to other vendors, etc. Now, coming to what are the solutions what Fortinet offers, I would categorize or classify the products into 3 different areas or technologies. What we talk about, the broader pillars of our security, what we mentioned is, one is a security-driven networking, the other pillar is the zero trust access, and the third one is the adaptive cloud security. So what are the driving factors for this in terms of security-driven networking? It is nothing but the convergence and the security. And this convergence needs to happen as there are newer network edges which is coming into picture. Zero trust access in today's world where most of the people are working from home, zero trust access becomes very, very important. Zero trust access or zero trust concept had been there for the past 10 years, but it has become very, very relevant and very much a requirement, a mandatory requirement, I would say, in today's world where people are working from home. And again, adaptive cloud security in terms of cloud security or cloud adoption of the companies, based on the nature of the business or based on the compliance requirements or based on the growth requirements, based on the OPEX, CAPEX, efficiency perspective, etc. A lot of companies had looked at cloud. Again, this pandemic has requested customers or the senior management to look at as to, from an availability perspective, when you are not able to go to office, when the resources are not available, what is the business impact, etc. Due to this key challenges, what is being faced, again, cloud has taken a very prominent place, and cloud is getting more and more adopted. I'm sure if you track in terms of the performance of the cloud companies, they are doing extremely well in this pandemic situation because of the growth and the customers adopting more and more cloud. So these are the three pillars what we talk about in terms of the security solutions what we offered. If I were to go a little more elaborate, we can categorize them into various products under these categories. In addition to the security-driven networking or cloud security or the zero trust access, we also have fabric management center. From a SOC perspective, we have various solutions which falls under the SOC solutions. We have various solutions which fall under the NOC solutions, and we also offer in today's world various FortiGuard security services. So, end of the day, what we are talking about is giving a 360-degree comprehensive security solutions in today's requirement, where it is no more about securing your data center or securing your corporate network. It is all about securing people and securing data, because end of the day, there is no boundaries. There is no boundaries for the people from where they are working, or there is no boundaries for where the data is residing. So the new norm is secure the people, secure the data. And in that process is where the zero trust also comes into picture, where in the current world, based on the nature of devices or the kind of access what users have to the applications, using various kind of devices, working from home, etc. The framework is that ideally you should not be trusting any of the users, nor you should not look at that data is secured. You should be clearly looking at how to validate each of the users and keep a very tight vigil and monitor in terms of what data is he accessing, in terms of any malicious activity happening, etc. So that is where the Fortinet complete security fabric or the security solution framework comes into play, where we give end-to-end solutions starting from your endpoint to network to application security to infrastructure security to NOC solutions, so that you can track, monitor, proactively identify and automate incident responses, etc.
Okay, thank you. So now, if we look back at the last 1.5 years, what happened during the pandemic is one fundamental difference is in the pattern of workloads have changed, and as far as security is concerned, what had happened is since so many employees are working from home or basically working from anywhere, a lot of heterogeneous devices and heterogeneous even networks are coming into the enterprise network. So, keeping that in mind and the security challenges that came, if you track last 1.5 year from a Fortinet perspective, which are the domains or verticals which saw maximum traction, or where you sort of helped customers secure their network in this situation better?
Okay, so before I get into what are the kind of verticals or the solutions, how we have helped the customers in that aspect, I just want to touch upon in terms of one of the very high-profile compromises or attacks which happened in the globe. It's not specific to, it is not an India-related one, but definitely this is something which can happen to India also, or we could end up in a similar kind of a situation if we don't learn from it and if we don't take corrective action on it. So the one which I want to touch upon is in terms of this colonial pipeline attack which happened in US. So just to give a small brief in terms of what was this attack. Colonial Pipeline is a company which provides almost 45% of the gas or the fuel requirement for the East Coast in US. So when we talk about the East Coast, it includes New York, Washington, DC, etc. So this Colonial Pipeline has a 5,500 mile pipeline going all the way from Texas, Houston, all the way to New Jersey. Now, this pipeline has the capability to carry 3 million barrels of fuel per day. And if you look at the company just to give a perspective, their revenue in 2020 was 1.4 billion. And from a profitability perspective, in the last 2 years, they had given a dividend of 820 million. Now, when we look at this Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack, this attack was reported on 7th of May. So one of the engineers saw a ransomware message on a computer at 5 a.m. in the morning, and he reported that incident to his superiors. And within 1 hour, the whole of the Colonial Pipeline was shut down. Now, let's look at as to what is the impact of this shutting down of this pipeline. So as I mentioned, since it's catering to the major chunk of or almost 50% of the fuel supplies, etc., in no time, there was fuel shortage, there was long queues at the fuel stations, there was hoarding of fuel and black marketing of the fuel. And then eventually, the fuel stations ran out of fuel. Now, from recovering from that attack, a ransom was requested. The Colonial Pipeline management decided to pay the ransom, and it has been confirmed by the CEO to the US Senate that they paid 4.5 million USD in ransom. And based on that, they got the decryption key. They started decrypting. The decryption of the data was very challenging. It took time, and they found that restoring the data was a much more faster way. They started restoring the data, and they were able to restart the fuel supply by May 12th. Now, typically, what is the reason doing this? Because normally when you hear about cyber threats or attacks which is happening, it is confined to a company. Company has a financial impact, companies, businesses getting impacted, etc. But here, due to this attack, the common public was impacted. And if you look at it, there were several states where they had shortage of fuel and they had to declare national emergencies, etc. And now let's look at the technical side of it from the IT perspective. Now, the team who was involved in this ransomware attack was called DarkSide Ransomware Group. Now, when you look at this DarkSide Ransomware Group, they offer ransomware as a service. So it is not that a person needs to be highly technically skilled and he has to develop his own tools, like how we go and order or purchase software online. In a similar way, a non-technical person with a malicious intent could go to such kind of people, reach out to them. They had a website, they had a 24/7 support line where when somebody is purchasing their services, if they get into challenges, to guide them, help them, they had a 24/7 helpline. So the point is, non-technical people could potentially get into this, and this was a classic example of a similar kind of attack. And if you look at it, it's not just decrypting of data, what is happening in today's ransomware, because a lot of companies, if they refuse to pay the ransom, to ensure that they have a plan B in place, this guys, what they do is, before encrypting the data, they also exfiltrate the data. They take out the data from the corporate network. So even in the Colonial Pipeline scenario, they had extracted 100 GB of corporate data. So if Colonial Pipeline had decided that they will not pay the ransomware, they would have then used this data to blackmail, saying that if we don't pay, then we are going to sell this data, we are going to make this data public, etc. So that would have had a major impact. So in today's world, security or a prevention from a ransomware, limiting it to having proper backup so that you can restore even if the data is getting encrypted, that is not true anymore, because the hackers are becoming more and more smarter. They are looking at multiple ways. Now, in this case, on May 7th, it was shut down. It restarted in May 12th. In between, the fuel prices in US went up, emergency was declared, Joe Biden has come out with a new security law. Now, the most important factor, how did the hackers get into this network? Now it has been confirmed, it has been publicly made available that it was a weak password or a compromised password for a VPN user using which these people were able to get into this network. So lot of times we talk about stronger passwords, multi-factor authentication, etc. This is again a classic example where a weaker password resulted a user using a weaker password, compromise of that weaker password, help the hackers to get into the network, and then this is the impact which happened. Now, the most interesting part of it, I was reading an article which said that the money what this people, the ransomware guys, what they had taken out, which was 4.5 million USD, which was in Bitcoin, half of that money was recovered from these hackers. And again, the loophole using which how they got into this Bitcoin infrastructure and extracted money was again a weak password. So they used a weak password to get into this colonial network, and the FBI and the legal teams used the same technique to compromise the Bitcoin network and extract, take out money from that same account. So this is where again, I'm sure people who are listening or viewing this would have heard from multiple agencies, security companies, professionals like me saying that in this today's world, a multi-factor authentication is the minimum requirement. But this again highlights this example, what I just mentioned, again highlights the importance of that. Secondly, now since this was impacting public in a big way, now there is an investigation going on. The CEO of Colonial Pipeline has already presented at the US Senate. He'll be still undergoing more scrutiny, etc. Now, when we talked about the reason why I said that they had paid 800 million in dividend in the last 2 years, there were questions asked in terms of what was their spending on cybersecurity. And the CEO was not giving any clear answer for it. His answer was that they spent 500 million on IT. So again, when the question was repeated in terms of what was the spending on the cybersecurity, he mentioned back saying that this 500 million what was spent on the IT infrastructure also includes security. Now, if you look at it, a company which paid 800 million in dividend in the last 2 years, spending 500 million on IT infrastructure, again, unable to quantify or justify in terms of what is their spending on cybersecurity. That is where, again, the challenges what is faced by a lot of companies, by the CISOs, CIOs, etc. It highlights that again, there's not enough importance or enough funds given to protect the IT infrastructure. Now, coming back to the question what you asked in terms of how we had been helping our customers, etc. in this pandemic situation. So the major requirement what was coming to us was that since the users who are working from home, now they are going to work from working from office now, since in the pandemic situation where we had multiple lockdowns which has happened. Starting from the first lockdown, we had been approached by a lot of our existing customers, new customers, saying that what is the solution what you can offer to help users who are sitting at home to securely connect to the network and access the data securely. At the same time, if at all, if the users are using personal infrastructure like personal laptop or desktop at home, etc., how one can also validate, do some compliance checks, ensure that there is no compromises or the basic hygiene is followed in that desktop or laptop from where they are accessing the corporate resources. So we had done multiple webinars for our partners, customers, etc., in terms of what are the solutions, how we can help, etc. Just to give you an example, like the FortiGate firewalls, which are the network security products, primary product of Fortinet, what we offered. We offered IPsec VPN and SSL VPN is an integrated functionality where there is no additional commercials involved. We explain that to the customer. Now, for additional security features, how the customers can leverage that functionality on the existing software at a minimal subscription cost or at a minimal license cost, etc. We also explained in terms of what are the use cases, what can be achieved, etc. Now, to give you a classic example, one of the leading banks in India adopted our solution where the banking employees, where they were working from home, every user, when they were connecting, they were using our multi-factor authentications to ensure that the users are getting validated, not just using a static password, even if it's a complex password. We were also, the bank was using a two-factor authentication, which was provided by us, which can be then installed on your mobile, where whenever you want to access the application, after you provide the password, once the password is validated, it will ask for a two-factor authentication token, and the token request would come to your mobile, or using your app in your mobile. You retrieve the instant token at that moment and put that value, and then the user gets validated. Now, once the user is identified, the FortiClient software, what we provide, could also do various compliance checks to ensure that the company's corporate policies or basic security checks are can be validated, etc. And then establish a secure connection back to the corporate network to give access to the data what the users otherwise was using sitting in the corporate network. So this was a classic example what we are offering. There were several customers due to the nature of business, the VPN solutions, whether it's from Fortinet or from other vendors, what they had deployed, which was for a small subset of mobile users till that time. Now, every user needs to have that kind of infrastructure, where the VPN concentrator or the next generation firewalls, which was deployed in the corporate networks in some scenarios, that was not adequate enough. And during the complete lockdown, physical movement of devices, even if they purchase for a company like Fortinet or any other company who is into hardware, supplying that solutions logistics-wise was a nightmare. So the solution or the approach, what Fortinet and many other vendors also, what we followed was, we provided virtual solution where the software was available, where if the customers had compute power available in their data centers or in their corporate network, they could use that sitting remotely. They could bring up the solution and then build that extra capacity what is required, so that the additional users requirement could be taken up. The alternate way was that adopting a public cloud, assuming that again infrastructure was not available or nobody could travel to the office to set up a new infrastructure. The other way was to connect all the VPN users to a cloud, and then from the cloud have a single VPN tunnel back to the VPN gateway in the corporate network, so that the load on the VPN device can be reduced, etc. So these are the kind of classic solutions what we provided. In addition, there were users who were looking at solutions where they are now, in today's world, people are looking at splitting their workload between offices and home going forward. So post the first wave of COVID, when companies were coming back to office, the IT team, a lot of IT teams were working on that plan in terms of to have that 80-20 or 75-25 or 70-30 kind of a plan, where 70% of the users going forward needs to be working from home, to have a scalable, watertight infrastructure to be developed for that. So in that kind of scenarios, there were a lot of endpoint compliance solutions like a NAC, EDR kind of solutions, what we are talking. And then we were also talking about SIM and SOAR kind of solutions, which needs to be deployed, so that the visibility, correlation of the activities, and using the AI, MI kind of intelligence, one could proactively detect any kind of malicious activity which is happening when the users are trying to access the data. So this was the kind of major framework or the solutions what we had been proposing to the customers, and how the customers had been able to leverage our solutions to live up to this new challenge what they faced during the pandemic.
Thank you. That was very comprehensive. I'll conclude with the what I would like to understand is over the next 2 to 3 quarters, what are going to be from the Fortinet perspective the key focus that can be in terms of solutions and services or domains. So, what are going to be the key focus areas?
So Fortinet globally also, and from an India perspective also, our focus would continue from a network security perspective. But in addition to network security, from an India perspective, from a work from home solution perspective, from a cloud adoption perspective, in addition to the standard intake of the security solutions, two of the verticals or the domains where Fortinet would be specializing. One is going to be SD-WAN, where when more and more workloads are going to the public cloud, more and more users are going to go work from home, etc. We are working with several companies where the top senior most officers, they need to have a very resilient, 100% available connectivity and a secure connectivity from their home all the way back to the office or to access the data. So we are talking about various solutions in that nature. So that is also where SD-WAN is going to play a very critical role. So SD-WAN is going to be one key focus area. Secondly, as we mentioned, and how customers had been adopting public cloud. Public cloud is going to be another key aspect and area and of focus for Fortinet. So we would be focusing and actively working with customers and partners in that journey where they are looking at more and more cloud adoption based on the pandemic situation or on the based on the IT framework or on the infrastructure what they are going to look at looking at the business needs for the next 3 years, 5 years, etc. The third area would be the endpoint, because since the data is going to reside everywhere, people could be using various kinds of devices to access the data, how that devices can be secured. The last or the not the least, the area what we would be focusing is the operational technology. Now, even when you look at Colonial Pipeline, the reason why they decided to shut down the complete network was because of the use of technology, how much entrenched they were into, but also the fear that the compromise, what has happened in the IT network, through which whether they had been able to, the hackers, whether they compromise anything on the OT network, line. This is infrastructure kind of environment what we are talking about. A same kind of a scenario incident can happen from a healthcare perspective, where a hospital or a healthcare system could be completely run and leveraged using the IT and the technology, how they are adopting it. A compromise where if that complete network comes down, look at the scenario of what can happen or what can go wrong. Not just from one hospital, it can be across that chain of hospitals, across a state, district, a nation, etc. kind of. So this is true for healthcare. This is true for ransomware. From a public transport perspective. So the impact of this kind of attacks can be very, very large scale, like India, where we are looking at smart cities and where we are deploying a huge amount of resources based on the current government, past government's vision and directions, including Bangalore's. I can see a lot of work happening for the smart city. There are a lot of cities where a lot of projects or a lot of milestones has been completed from a smart city, etc., where more and more technology is getting deployed. So it's also of paramount importance that this kind of technology, when more and more technology is getting involved in terms of controlling traffic light or water distribution or power distribution, etc., to ensure that the hackers does not take people or nation to as hostages. Proper care and investment needs to be made to protect this infrastructure, and that is where we feel the OT security also is very, very important in today's world. And that is also an area what we are focusing, where we are doing multiple sessions solutions for our customers, partners. We are aligning with the OT provider, the operational technology providers like Snyder, Stevens, GE, ABB, etc. We are collaborating with them where they know that domain, they are the experts in that domain. We try to collaborate with them to make them aware, to help them to design, architect this OT networks where uh, the networks can be secured, the convergence of OT IT can still happen, because in today's world, isolated OT network is no more business uh, uh, requirement. It is a business requirement, but it's not a feasible requirement, because there is a lot of visibility what is required, the operational efficiency required, threat intelligence required, even data correlation what is required, etc. So there is 100% requirement of OT and that IT network to converge at some point, and that convergence can bring in a lot of threats, and that is where focus on OT is also equally important. And Fortinet also as an organization, we would be focusing on that.
Okay, got it. Thanks a lot. It was appreciate you taking your time out for giving this brief. Thanks again, and have a good day.